Thanks very much for joining us for our last event of the day, our career panel. We are very pleased to be joined by starting a little bit of introduction. I'll leave most of the introduction actually to the speakers themselves because I believe we're going to go over introduction a little bit. Dr. John Donahue, our moderator for today, he's the scientific manager, he's the senior manager of scientific outreach at the Institute of Quantum Computing. Starting with Dr. Mark Jackson. He is the senior quantum evangelist at Quantinuum. Aaron Bush, he's the CEO of Entangled Networks. And Narain Noorani, data scientist researcher at the Bank of Canada. And David Bacon, quantum computing educator at Stanford. And with that, I'll pass it on to you, John.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Moshe. So, welcome everyone to the final session today. It's a pleasure to be moderating this panel on careers in quantum technologies. Thank you so much to the organizers for inviting me to do this. So as we've seen over the last couple of days, there is a ton of different things you can do in quantum information science. It's not just one thing or another. There are many ways that this intersects with various fields of study as well as various fields of application. So in order to get a broader sense, a broader idea of what some of those career paths might look like in quantum technologies, it's a pleasure to invite our 4 speakers back today. So I'm going to give them each about 5 minutes to introduce themselves, their career path, and a bit about what they do now. And then afterwards, essentially this session is completely up to you. Feel free to ask as many questions as you want. Feel free to direct them at one speaker, direct them to the whole panel. If you do direct to one speaker, we'll make sure to give the rest of the panelists a chance to chime in as they wish. But first, I'd like to get to meet our panelists a bit more. So as mentioned, we are joined by Mark Jackson from Quantinuum, Aaron Brodich from Entangled Networks, Narain Noorani from the Bank of Canada, and David Wakeham from Xanadu. And Aaron, I'd like to invite you first. Tell us a bit about yourself, what you do with Entangled Networks, and yeah, what got you there?
Okay, yeah, thanks John, and thanks for the organizers, one for having me here and also for organizing this great conference. Yeah, so my name is Aaron Brodich. I am the CEO of Entangled Networks, and Entangled Networks is building solutions for the most important problem in quantum computing, and that is scaling quantum computers up. At the end, if we want to use quantum computers, we need to have them, and we need to have them big enough. And the only way to grow, to make a quantum computer really large, is to take lots of really good small ones and connect them in a network. And we are building the tools to do that. And that means hardware that allows the quantum computers to exchange quantum information, and that's done by sharing entanglement or generating entanglement between the cores. But more importantly, we're building the software that allows the information to flow between these cores, and we are by far the best in the world at doing this. But this is a career panel, and so I'll tell you a bit about my background. So I did a PhD in quantum information, and then went to the Institute for Quantum Computing pretty much at the time John got there, and started a postdoc. And I was, and I still am, a theoretical physicist, but I wanted to get closer to experiment, and so I asked Ray Laflamme, who was my supervisor, to get more involved with experiments. That was incredibly exciting. I never touched any of the experiments, unfortunately for me, but fortunately for the experiments. But I really liked being close to where physics was really being done. And then I went to a second postdoc at the University of Toronto, working in 2 quantum optics groups as sort of the house theorists. And again, very, very exciting work. I learned a lot about what happens in the lab. It is, for a theorist, it is very, very illuminating to see what kind of problems experimentalists have, things that I just didn't imagine existed before. But then 4 years into that postdoc, I decided that I want to go into industry. It wasn't an immediate sort of decision. It took about 2 years to sort of build up my desire to go to industry, and sort of build up the courage. And a big thing, a big catalyst for that at the end was the person who would eventually become my co-founder at Entangled Networks, who was also a postdoc at U of T. And together we started this company, solving, again, what we thought was this insanely big problem, but also a problem that almost no one had really explored outside of academia. Yeah, so that's about me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron. I would like to next introduce Nurain Noorani, a data scientist at the Bank of Canada and engineering physics student at Carleton University. Nurain, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm Nurain Noorani. I'm a final year engineering physics student at Carleton University, and have been working at the Bank of Canada with Vladimir, who some of you guys met yesterday, in their quantum lab for advanced analytics. I got into quantum computing kind of around the time that Google announced supremacy. That was sort of my time that, I was enlightened by the idea, and that was the first step in the rabbit hole of quantum computing. From there, I found IBM Qiskit Summer School when they posted that on YouTube in, I guess that would have been September of 2020. And watched all those lectures like it was like a season of Friends. And then that next summer in 2021, I was again with John at the USEQIP. Yeah, they have to have a better nickname for that. And I joined him at that sort of summer school. That was, I guess it was online, so it was the whole summer. And did the 2021 Qiskit Summer School, which was on quantum machine learning. And then that's when I met, that summer is when I met Vladimir and interviewed for a position at the Bank of Canada. I started there in September 2021, and now I work there full time. So at the bank, what we're doing in our lab, and as some of you guys heard yesterday, is we're looking at quantum computing, like the applications of quantum computing and how they can be applied to solve the different mandates that the Bank of Canada has to maintain the Canadian economy. So thus far, what I've been working with Vladimir and the team there is, so the first project that I kind of jumped in on was on natural language processing, so both classical and quantum. And we were specifically looking at quantum transfer learning. So basically taking something like the BERT model, which is like Google's big AI, with, they spend millions and millions of dollars training that, and then sort of adding a quantum layer to the end of it, and seeing how, if we compare that to a classical one with the same number of features, which one performs better. And then we had that project in conjunction with a few other departments that looked at other types of quantum machine learning methods for natural language processing. And then a few other projects that we did was the one that we spoke about yesterday, and you heard about Agnostic, where we're looking at forecasting and using anomaly detection using kernel methods to see if we could, with the Bitcoin data or USDT, see if we could see if a big whale came in and put a lot of money into an exchange, could we identify that anomaly by just looking at the trading data. Right now, what I'm doing is sort of spearheading a project on differential equations and how we can use quantum computing to solve differential equations in relation to economics. So in economics, one of the things that the Bank of Canada does is tries to model the Canadian economy and identify risks through these economic models, and like the solo growth model. So basically, what we're trying to see is, can quantum computers do this better? So at least in the future, because it's hard to do anything better now with the current hardware. But to sort of see the trajectory of how quantum computers can scale and become a valuable tool to people at the bank and the economists at the bank. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much, Narayan. So this is a careers panel, and one of the nice things about working in a new field like quantum technologies is that there's a reasonable chance that you might be the only person in the world with your job title. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mark Jackson, who's a senior quantum evangelist with Continuum. Mark, can you tell us a bit more about what that means and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely, and I actually have to say that I'm not only not the only one with that job title, but the other person is right over there, and there's actually one more in Oxford. There's 3 of us quantum evangelists, yes, and I'll actually say a bit more about that at the end. So hello, it's nice to see some of you again. I am Mark Jackson, the Senior Quantum Evangelist at Quantinuum. And to give you some background of how I arrived here, so as an undergrad, I studied physics and mathematics at Duke University in North Carolina, and then I did my PhD at Columbia University in New York in string theory. And some of you might be familiar with Brian Greene for his books and NOVA shows and everything, and so Brian was my PhD advisor. And so it was very exciting to do this. I graduated in 2004. String theory was on a roll. We had done a lot of stuff, and I focused on the cosmology part, trying to identify ways that we could prove string theory one way or the other, because you might know that it's mathematically very elegant, but we don't have any proof that it's actually true or not. And so I spent several years as a postdoc trying to find evidence for string theory either way, using cosmological data. And that was wonderful for a few years, but after 9 years of doing this and 3 postdocs, you get a little bit tired of it. My mother asked me why I kept getting fired every 3 years, not understanding that's just how postdocs worked. And so I kind of resolved, like I was up for my 3rd faculty interview, and I kind of told myself, if it works out, great, and if it doesn't, I'm going to find something else to do with my life. And it didn't. So I had this idea to start a business doing science fundraising, because there's always a funding crunch in science, and I had always kind of wanted to start my own business. And so I started this company called Fiat Physica, which means make physics happen. And it was sort of Kickstarter for science. The Kickstarter had just come out. This was 2014. So that new ideas like crowdfunding were a thing. And so for about 2.5 years, I did this, and we were actually very successful in raising a lot of money for projects, but it wasn't financially sustainable. I couldn't live off this. And so I kind of reluctantly realized I had to get a real job again. And so I moved to California and started applying for jobs, and ironically was hired as faculty. After leaving academia, I was brought back in, and I was hired as faculty at a place called Singularity University, which isn't about the singularity, and it's not a university. It's more of a Silicon Valley think tank. And so I started giving lectures about technology, including quantum computing. This was a new thing that hadn't existed a few years ago. And I was absolutely amazed, because things like superposition and entanglement, of course, I had theoretically studied, but the idea that we could build machines to just routinely do this and it was useful just blew my mind. And so I was excited, but I felt a little weird lecturing about it at Singularity, because I felt sort of like a cheerleader. Like I was talking about it, but I actually wanted to be doing it for real. And so I started kind of putting feelers out. Were there any jobs available to do this? And this was back in 2016. There were a handful of quantum startups, but there were very few jobs. But very luckily, a friend of mine did know someone, and his name was Ilyas Khan, and he was the founder of what was then called Cambridge Quantum Computing. And it was a small British startup. And so I was introduced to Ilyas, and it was one of those times I was just in the right place at the right time, because they were a small startup. They had about 30 people. They were all in the UK. They had wanted to hire someone to do business development for them, and they even had wanted someone to be in the West Coast. And I was living in Berkeley. So I was hired September 1st of 2017. So I was the first one in America, and I was the first one doing business development. And let me tell you, doing quantum business development 5 years ago was really difficult. No one took it seriously. It was really tough to convince companies to do this. But we stuck with it, and our scientific teams made a lot of progress. So we focused on doing quantum software, because we knew that we couldn't compete with the big dogs like Google and IBM and Honeywell and Microsoft and such. And so we kept at it, and we grew, and we developed partnerships with a lot of quantum companies. And about a year ago, you probably saw this, that Honeywell Corporation spun out their quantum group, which did hardware, and Cambridge Quantum merged with them to form this new company called Quantinuum. And so that's how we came to be Quantinuum. And so we are now the largest quantum company in the world. I think we just hit 500 employees, about 3/4 of whom are doing scientific research, and the rest of us do things like business development and such. So it's a very exciting time. Our group has hardware and software, obviously. Since you mentioned my title, I'll tell you how that came about. So when I was hired, they didn't really know what to do with me, because I had the scientific background, but I was sort of on the biz dev side, so they gave me the boring title of scientific lead of business development. And that was fine for about 3 years, but about 2 years ago, they wanted something more interesting. And so they came up with this term of quantum evangelist. And what do you think? Do you like the title? Yeah? I've had mixed results. A few months ago, I was in Europe, and this professor said he would host me, but he was not going to introduce me using that title because it was so offensive. And okay, that's his opinion. I just hadn't anticipated that. I think it was a cultural thing. I'll tell you that I once had a second date with a woman who told me that our child, and I repeat, this is our second date, our child would be running for president, and how could they possibly do that with a father with the job title of quantum evangelist? So I've had some mixed feedback on the title, but I actually like it. So yeah, I just want to close by saying you're in exactly the right place at the right time. It's sort of like 5 years after the transistor was invented. There's going to be some really exciting things coming up, and as students, you're in a really good position to actually not just get a good job, but really make a difference, because the fundamental discoveries will be made in the next few years by yourselves. So with that, I'll pass.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Okay.
Finally, we have with us David Wakeham, a quantum computing educator with Xanadu right here in Toronto. David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you all for coming. So I have the dubious honor of being the only person who provided slides. So just briefly about my background. I actually kind of have a similar background to Mark. So I studied philosophy and math when I was an undergrad. I don't know what's going on. I did a master's in theoretical particle physics, where I studied cosmology, actually, so early universe cosmology. And then I thought that was kind of a bit of a dead end. So I decided to move to Canada and do string theory. I didn't... No comment. So I didn't actually go through the route of doing multiple postdocs and then kind of giving up. I had the option of postdocs and this job in quantum computing, and I'll explain kind of why I chose that. So I have a bunch of work experience in teaching and outreach, which is something that I'm really passionate about. Now, I was doing this sort of alongside my studies, and sort of as a result of that, I did a residency at Xanadu last year. And I'll kind of talk a little bit more about what I did, but it was a dream job, and I was like, wait, what? I'm getting paid to do this? And so I decided that I just wanted to keep doing that, and accepted a position as an educator, starting about a month ago, actually. So I'm kind of like pretty fresh, but it's a lot of fun, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I do. But before I do, maybe I should explain, like, how did I get into quantum computing? How do I know anything about it? What has it got to do with the stuff that I've studied? And the answer is actually kind of cool. So the topic of my thesis, my PhD thesis, was basically black holes. And it turns out that there's a very strict sense in which a black hole is a type of quantum computer. It's actually a terrible quantum computer. It's the worst possible, the most annoying quantum computer you can imagine. What it does is you feed stuff into it and it gobbles it up more efficiently than anything else in the universe. It is so annoying. But it's also cool. And relatedly, it turns out that wormholes are entangled quantum computers. And when I say it turns out, what I mean is that, like, string theorists think that this is true, and there's like some good heuristic reasons for thinking this way, and it actually leads to some interesting insights, but it's not provable in the sense of math, but it's fun. But this kind of got me interested in quantum information theory, in quantum computing, and that was part of the reason that I did the residency, was to learn more about quantum computing, because it seemed kind of interesting, and maybe I would learn something about black holes. And the answer is I did, and remarkably, you can learn a lot of cool things about black holes. For instance, how to, unscramble, the solution to like a difficult math problem that you accidentally threw into the black hole from the Hawking radiation that comes out of it, using tools from quantum mechanics and quantum computing, which is, I think, pretty sick. Okay, so what does my day-to-day look like? Okay. So during the residency, I helped develop a really cool thing called the the Quantum Codebook, which is basically an interactive code-first textbook. So you basically do programming exercises as you go along, and you also, learn about the nature of the universe and how to do cool algorithms and stuff like that. But it was a dream project. It was amazing to get to work on that. I woke up every day just being like, wow, it's like I just get to go and eat candy for work. That's what I do, and they're paying me for it. It was awesome. And this is something I really love, just like finding ways to make learning quantum computing accessible and fun. So since I started a month ago, I've been involved in making stuff out of Lego, designing multiple puzzles, coming up with coding exercises, drawing pictures of, I don't know, like a bear, a clock, I don't know, various other things. Just stuff that it's like, wait, again, why am I getting paid to do this? This is just what I do, like, in my spare time, so it's great. And I also really still like research, and I get to continue doing that. So I'm interested in quantum machine learning, quantum algorithms, quantum chemistry, and it's fun to think about these things. So that's my kind of day-to-day. It's a very, very cool time to get involved. So I think all of you are have made the right choice by coming to attend the conference and just being interested in the topic. So yeah, I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. All right, so the rest of our time is really just for Q&A. We have about half an hour left, but I'll get things started. David, you were talking about the day-to-day.
Yeah.
You've been in the QC educator role for about a month or so maybe it's a little early to tell, but you just came out of academia, kind of the traditional path that a lot of people think of. What do you see as the biggest kind of day-to-day differences between what you were doing as a student, postdoc, versus what you're doing now with Xanadu?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one thing is that when you work in industry, you're a lot more tightly coupled to your coworkers. You care about the same things, you attend a lot more meetings. When I was a graduate student, I would kind of like float around, and my supervisor would just sort of forget about me for weeks at a time. And sometimes that was convenient for me, and sometimes it was inconvenient. But there's a sense that you are more tightly coupled, for better or worse. Sometimes that means you have deadlines and you actually have to meet. The pace is different, but I actually really like being in an environment where everyone kind of cares about the same thing, more or less, and you have these sort of well-defined interfaces with other teams and so on, and that's very, very different from academia, in my experience at least. But yeah.
Aaron and Mark, you both kind of had the experience of doing postdocs, going through that rigmarole, and then eventually Aaron starting a company, Mark joining Cambridge Quantum Computing, later Continuum. Maybe starting with Aaron, what do you see as kind of the biggest day-to-day differences between when you were working with a team in academia versus now working on a team with Entangled Networks?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the same things. When you're in academia, you kind of tend to make up your own projects, and the reason you're doing them is because that's what you want to do. And you're doing them mostly alone, maybe with a small team that hopefully cares about the same things, but maybe they don't, and they take it in their own direction, and that's fine. Everyone's kind of happy as long as you're publishing. And then in a company, suddenly everyone's working on the same thing, and it's incredible because on top of just having everyone working on exactly the same thing, everyone is already extremely knowledgeable in what they're doing, whereas in academia there's always a couple of new PhD students who are learning, and it's this incredible privilege to teach people. But if you're trying to get research done quickly, you want people who know their stuff. And with us at Entangled Networks, we're 6 people. Everyone has a PhD in physics. Everyone has done a bit of a postdoc, and so we know what we're doing. We get research done extremely fast, and so on the sort of getting work done side, it's unbelievable. Then there's the maybe other side of it, which is myself as CEO. There is a lot of overhead. Some of it is bureaucracy, which is not fun. But another piece is people, right? So again, as a physicist, and especially as a theoretical physicist, you're kind of alone. You meet people once in a while, having coffee, but that's it. And in a company, you're interacting with people every day, and it's a very diverse group of people that you get to interact with. I really enjoy talking to people and, you know, meeting people who are very different, and going out of my own comfort zone in these areas. But I think, you know, a lot of academics, it's hard for them and it's not what they want to do. And there are roles in industry where you can still kind of sit in your own hole and still, you know, be shut down, you know, shut down in your office and work. But at least for me, that's one of the huge and differences and big benefits of being in industry.
So I'm proud of the work I did as an academic. I worked at very good places with really great people, and I worked hard, and there were certainly some articles I did that I'm proud of. Can I honestly say that I changed string theory and made major discoveries that would be remembered from decades from now? Probably not. Yeah, there are a few people who have done that, but the majority of academics sort of ride the coattails of a few very visionary people, and so I can't honestly say that I really made much of a difference in the string cosmology world. But I can honestly say that I made a change in just 5 years. I can see that I did have an effect in our company and in the field. I can identify several examples of times where I went to some event, I spoke with someone, they persuaded their company to hire us, they paid us a lot of money, we worked on an important project, we figured out some amazing things. So I do feel like I made a difference, and I think that's probably the biggest change from academia. I also note that in academia, there's this sense of momentum. People tend to keep doing the same thing that they did before. And there's friends I have in academia where I talk to them now, and they're studying exactly the same equation that they did 15 years ago. And I kind of comment on this, and they're like, no, but I used to study it when the coefficient was that, and now I'm studying the equation where it's this other thing. And wow, but every day, like I think you see the responses you've gotten, every day is different, and it's constantly changing. The field is developing very rapidly. And so it's very exciting. I feel like I've been able to live several lives. And so I'm much happier doing what I do now.
Narayan, you haven't had as much experience in academia, but how do you find that working at a place like the Bank of Canada in the day-to-day differs than other experience you've had, or just differs from studying?
They don't test me like they do in school. No finals, yeah. I really like working at the bank, like in the sense that like there's a lot of opportunities to really apply everything that we've learned, and it actually has made school a lot more fun. I don't know if I wasn't into quantum computing, like my quantum mechanics class would be as interesting as it is right now. I've also like thoroughly annoyed my professors with all the questions that I have about quantum computing, which I don't think I would have unless I had that like experience in working. And then also I've annoyed Vladimir with all the questions that he's nodding his head with all the questions that I have. Like in terms of like on the day-to-day, it's different because you're working on like projects per se, not assignments, and you're learning as you're doing the projects. Yeah, that's really all I can really say to it, because that's what it is, right? You learn as you go along. So as something like quantum machine learning and variational quantum algorithms, I learned it by implementing it, right? I didn't spend as much time maybe on doing assignments on the theory and understanding every nook and crook, but I understood exactly what we were doing for that project and learned how to implement it, and in a sense that's like a more applicable way of doing it. So yeah.
All right, I think I see a couple questions down in this row here.
Hello. So I'm a computer science undergraduate, okay? I'm good at what I do, algorithm analysis, coding, I'm good at that, but I have very minimal understanding of physics behind the quantum computing. I have no PhDs like any of you, so once I do graduate, what kind of role can I expect if I try to get into the industry?
Are you asking a specific person, or? I am in the exact same position as you in that sense, like in a lot of ways that I don't like once I graduate. I know, so one thing that I sort of, when I look at quantum computing and quantum mechanics, I try and look at it from a math standpoint. And when you look at it at a math standpoint, it's a lot like, linear algebra. So like in the sense of like, do you know enough to keep learning? Absolutely. I think 100%, you do. For my position, there's a lot of like, I would, whenever someone asks me about it, I normally say that I got really lucky in finding my position. But I know that right now, unlike any other time in the world, or any time like in history, well, I guess the history of quantum computing, because saying the history of the world is kind of weird when you're talking about quantum computing. But like there's more opportunities now than ever. And I know in companies like IBM and they are looking for people like us, to train specific to the roles that they want. So I think these guys will give you a better answer than I will. But I know, at least like if you were to ask me one-on-one, that's what I'd tell you.
I'll just say, so the simple answer is, yes, we absolutely need computer scientists in quantum. That's a crucial part of it in the research side. And then on like the business side of things, most people on our business development team have expertise in some other area in science, and then they kind of figured out the quantum computing part. I might add one thing though, is that you and everyone else in this audience, you're all very young. So it's not like you say, well, I've majored in this, so that's it. I'm stuck with that. There is more than enough time for you to change and learn and do everything. And I remember, so my fall of my junior year of college, I was starting to do my graduate school applications. And you have to write an essay and apply to kind of a specific program within physics. And I remember really stressing about this. I felt like the words I write in this essay will influence my entire life. And I said something to my undergrad advisor, and he said, almost everything in life can be changed if you really want to. There's only two exceptions, children and suicide. And that actually stuck with me my whole life, and it's true. Like if you don't like the direction your life is headed, in almost every case you can change if you really want it to. And so maybe right now you're studying computer science, but if you work hard, you can absolutely learn the physics or anything else. And so don't feel stuck at all. You're all still very young, and you can learn.
I think Vladimir had his hand up for a bit. Was there anything that David earned that you wanted to add, or? Maybe something. Yeah, sure.
This could be like a biased and personal impression, but I think it's probably easier for people with grounding in computer science and software development and stuff like that to pick up the physics that they need to contribute productively than the other way around, based on the physicist coders that I know.
Not wrong.
This question leads well into my question. I wanted to know more about the job market during the past couple of years and then look into the future. So this would be a question specifically for Mark, Aharon, and David, perhaps, if you know. So how much has your company grew over the past few years, and how much people are you looking to hire in the next few years?
So we're growing very rapidly. So I think I mentioned we have about 500 people now. We're hiring in every area, so please check out our website. As kind of an extension of the previous question, one of the great things about quantum computing is that it draws on so many different talents: physics, chemistry, mathematics, computer science, and everything like that. And so whatever your interest is, you can certainly find some niche area or invent one, even better. There's that movie about Facebook, and the best line in that movie is, "Don't just find a job, invent one." And that always seemed very profound to me. And so right now there are so many companies. I think last I heard there were like 400 quantum companies, and they're hiring, and it's a very exciting time.
Aaron, from the perspective of a fresher startup?
Yeah, so I think we're a little bit different from the others in that we're very small, and also we are extremely deep in the technology. And for us, we're still building the ground, and that ground has to be people who really, really know their stuff going in and can, later teach other people the basic physics or the basic, computer science that has to go into quantum computing. But, being a team of 6 physicists, one thing we understand very well is the lack of quantum engineers. And I think this is an area that doesn't exist. There are no real quantum engineers being trained anywhere in the world. And there are some programs that are trying to get that, but it's hard. And it's hard because, it's an area that was sort of born out of physics and theoretical computer science. And so, those are, in computer science, there are a lot of people going in the engineering route, but they're not the theoretical computer scientists. And so we've built a world that was extremely academic, and it's changing very rapidly, and we're seeing industry change mode, I think, in the last few years, going from a very physics-based industry where, us as physicists, we also tend to be a bit cocky and believe that we can do everything. And, physicists can write code. It's terrible, but it will work, right? It's going to do the job somehow. But when you're and it works very well when you're building, a PhD project, and you do cutting-edge science doing that. But when you're building a computer that has to work over many years with you outside the room, then you need to have the engineers. And one thing that I've noticed after 2 years of trying to change that mindset within myself is looking at very simple engineering, very simple things that engineers have built, and saying, now I realize how much work has gone into this. And they knew how to put that screw in there in that way ahead of time. It wasn't trial and error, and it didn't work the first time, and they sold a bunch of things and broke down, and they knew what they were doing. And so I think, getting engineers, getting software engineers into quantum, and having just enough physicists and theoretical computer scientists guiding them and sort of helping out where we need that to happen is the way it's going to happen. But again, with a smaller company, you still need to build that base, that very strong quantum base.
Thank you. So yeah, I am kind of only a month in, but I know that we're about, I think, 130 people or something, so smaller than Quantinuum, but growing very, very rapidly, hiring in all areas. And I just wanted to actually just mention the residency program. So I was part of this residency program last year, and technically it's open to students from every area. So we have some bright undergraduates come in. It's mainly masters and PhD students, but you can definitely apply. So I would just advise people who are interested in getting involved to check it out. But we have other sorts of internships as well. But in terms of like full-time positions and stuff like that, it's all areas. And yeah, it's a bit crazy. So like it feels a little bit crazy kind of coming in. And when I was there last year, it's like a different company, just based on how rapidly it's growing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there were a couple up at the front were the first 2 hands I saw, and then, one there and one there afterwards.
Okay, so I'm currently a computer science specialist in the physics major, but right now I'm mostly completing my comp sci, and I have a relatively lesser physics. So I feel like I'm at a slight disadvantage when applying for these Quantinuum. So what will compensate in case if I do not have like actual like academic experience?
That's a great question. So I think that a lot of companies, and you know, I think you guys will be able to comment on this more, but I think a lot of companies are actually looking for practical skills. And so the fact that you've done well in a course is great, but not that many places offer quantum computing courses. And what is much more impressive is, I don't know, for instance, you have a GitHub account where you've implemented some non-trivial algorithm, or you've done something yourself. You've, you know, I don't know, done like a Kaggle, but using a quantum computer or something along those lines. So showing initiative, showing that you know stuff. A lot of people will do, so like the Qiskit summer schools are really, really cool. You can get these certificates, but I think if you have those in addition to personal projects or portfolio, that's really impressive. And I mean, of course, it depends on the sort of position that you're going for, but if you're thinking of something which is in the quantum software engineering kind of vein, I think that's really impressive. And that's my impression anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I'll speak it from my perspective, because I was only I had just finished my third year. So I'd only done one quantum mechanics course, and you know, I had never really worked. I had only done one internship as a software engineer, and at least like upon like asking the people who hired me, Vladimir, I think like what showed, like at least what he said showed in my interview when I applied, was just like the passion and the fact that, you know, like I didn't learn I haven't learned quantum computing through school. I learned it on my own, and I studied it on my own. And I think when you've done that, you sort of speak about it very differently, and that translates. So, you know, attending conferences like these, and you know, when you go home, you know, go through the Xanadu codebook and go through the Kiswick textbook. Try some of those, like some of the main algorithms. Start with Grover's or Shor's or, you know, the HHL. Like they're all really interesting, and you'll start to build an intuition and an understanding of what you're doing, and that will show when you speak.
I agree with everything they said. I would just add, we publish a lot of articles, so you actually can see exactly what we're working on. And so I absolutely agree. The most impressive thing is to see practical skills that you're actually coding things. And we especially like it when you're actually building on things that we're doing, because that means that if we were to hire you for a job or an internship, you're ready to go from day one, you know exactly what we're working on, and you've probably had some ideas of your own. And so the best thing you can do is study the articles that we publish and try to work on them on your own. That would be the best way to go about it, I think.
Yeah. Maybe along those lines, I do want to add something. I think, you know, one of the things you want to do when you're applying for a job is do a bit of research on the place where you're applying. You know, if you're going to work for Quantinuum, read a few papers, see that, you know, what they're doing is of interest, and ideally, I don't know who said create. You said create. You know, create the job.
I was quoting Larry Summers at Harvard in the movie, but yeah.
Okay,
I didn't
but
come up with it.
okay,
Yeah.
but you know, for us again, we're a small company. We are looking for, you know, very, very skilled people. But if someone was to tell me, and we had, you know, an undergrad intern who told me, I can come work for you and do these things. In that case, they weren't technical things, but they were things that I was doing, and I was very happy to give that person. And that's, you know, that's extremely helpful as an employer to see, oh, this person is going to solve these problems for me. And he's, you know, looked at the website, he kind of knows what we're doing. And you know, the same thing, we have a master's intern who's doing unbelievable work, but the way she started was reaching out and saying, I'm interested in what you're doing, and this is the reason why I'm interested. And, you know, that just helps us to understand, you know, where we can kind of get the intern, where we can kind of help. And remember that, you know, everyone who's taking in an intern wants to get something out and wants to give something back to the intern, but we need to know what you guys want back from the internship, more than, oh, I'm just exploring quantum computing, it's really cool, so why us? Like, why aren't you going to these guys who are much bigger, or to these guys? So, understand what you want, and show that in the application, in the interview. I think that's, extremely helpful.
Excuse me, what's extremely helpful?
If you tell us, when you apply for a job and during the interview, you say what you want and where you can help. And again, it's different if you have all the skills. If we're looking for, a person who knows optics and has done 5 years in, AMO physics as a PhD, and someone says, okay, I've done that, check. But if you're applying as an intern, we need to know why and where you can help us.
Just also like to add on to that, there's a lot of talk about like kind of coding portfolios, and that depends very much on the position. If we're looking for someone at an intern level, I know that when I look for interns, it's like, okay, you can code a lot, that's good. But what I really want to know is, if I give you a power tool, will you hurt yourself? I can teach you the coding. I don't want to teach you how to solder. So like those kind of practical skills are also very important, especially at the intern level.
Hello. I wanted to understand a little bit more of how you create a startup in this quantum computing area. Like, how do you bring a really academic research and turn that into a business kind of service? And what was like the journey when you started your startup, and what is the landscape kind of like today to start up a quantum computing business?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think the first thing, and Mark has done this, so he can comment as well, is just do it. You want to do it, you just start, and you'll figure things out on the way. That's the number one advice I can give. But for us, we were lucky in the sense that we started at a very good time for starting companies, which was 2 years ago. Starting a company now is going to be a lot harder because the markets are down. It's just harder to get money, and so that's one piece, which is just luck and timing, and you don't always know what the timing is, and then bringing in a good team, believing in yourself, believing that you can bring results. And in our case, we just had a ton of experience in quantum. I knew what this huge problem was. I knew that I had the skills to solve this huge problem. There was, and there still is, a question of timing. When will people need this problem solved? But you just start and hope for the best. I would certainly, if there is one piece of counter advice to just do it, is quitting school to do it is probably not the best idea. It's a huge risk. Like, do it when you're done with your degree. I did it sort of at the end of 2 postdocs. Yeah, that's one piece of just do it, but make sure that you're not destroying something that you've worked hard for in the middle, unless you hate what you're doing, in which case just quit and do what you like.
Yeah, I didn't actually found the company. I was just one of the first employees.
No, but you said before that you found it.
Oh, yeah, I did found that company. It wasn't anything as sophisticated as quantum computing, though. But yes, it was kind of a shock going from academia to starting a company and jumping into the business world. But it actually was one of the best things that happened to me, because it gave me so much business and practical real world experience. I don't think they would have hired me at Cambridge Quantum to do business development stuff if I hadn't done that for a few years. And so it was, even though it was difficult, and 2.5 years, it was kind of painful to have to fold the company. It was a really good thing in hindsight. I think it set me up well for this job.
Okay. I think, the next question we had was in the middle there.
Yeah, thank you. So sorry, I just had a similar question to that. You mentioned about trying to create your own job, like try to create new jobs and not just find a job. And I was interested in knowing how do you like, let's say you want to create your own job, but at the same time, if no one is like, how do you do that without doing a startup? Like, how do you create your own job without actually having to create a startup and then make your own business and all of that stuff? How do you like pursue the companies that I want to do this, hire me to do this?
Yeah, so, one thing, again, you look at the company's website, you look at whatever public information you have, and just figure out, this is where I can contribute. I am really good at writing code, and I know Qiskit, and, given that, I can do this job for you guys. And if someone, who's an undergrad comes to me and says, I'm really good at Qiskit and I can do this job for you guys, then that person has probably not looked deeply enough into what we're doing, because that's not what we need, right? But again, I had an intern, and he said, I can help with doing these other administrative things that you can't do, or you might not have time to do, and that was incredible. But had he not said that, it wouldn't have popped into my head that, okay, I need help with these things. So just think, this is what I want to do at this company, and approach the person and say, this is what I want to do at the company. And the worst thing you'll hear is no, right? But the best thing you'll hear is, okay, come to work with us. No one's going to get upset. No one's going to think you're stupid for doing it.
Yeah, everything he said is exactly right. You can find something and become the world expert in it, so you're the authority, and develop it as much as you want to, and then at some point you could contact companies if they haven't already contacted you, and you could say, this is the thing I can do for you, either on the technical side or the business side, and then they might say, oh, well, we didn't have an opening for that, but we should, and you're the only person qualified for the job. So yeah, that's exactly right.
Noreen or David, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I can just say this based on being a month in and defining my job as I go along. And that's kind of something else that, this is a slightly different model as opposed to kind of coming to a company and saying, hey, hire me to do this thing that I think you need. I've been hired by the company based on work I did as a resident, where I came in and they were like, look, here's some things you can do. I did well on them or whatever. And then they said, okay, you come back, keep doing that. But the company's needs have changed, and part of what's happening is I'm assessing what they need based on what I see, and then saying, hey, can I do this? What do you think about, what if we do this? And because of the age and stage of the company, it's actually very easy to, well, it's not, sometimes there's pushback, sometimes it's negotiation, but it's definitely possible to define as you go along. And so I keep just asking to do crazy stuff, and they're like, you know what, actually you've convinced me, that's good, let's do that. Which is great. So that's part of why it feels like a dream job right now. So yeah.
All right, I think, yeah, we'll move on to the next question there.
My question, I guess, is how does an academic make the shift from academia to industry? How do you convince a company, like a big company, to hire you, an outside professional, versus someone who has spent their entire life, entire academic life training for that job, like maybe an academic trying to get into software development or finance or something like that? It may be a bit general, but since many of your PhDs who have entered industry, I thought I could ask this question.
I'll just quickly comment that so Xanadu is almost entirely made up of people who were in academia and then decided that they wanted to get into industry and work on this like fairly academic technical project, which is building a quantum computer. So almost everyone is in that position, and that makes it a lot easier. So they're assessing the base level assessment is totally different. They're not looking for people who are kind of software engineers by training who have like 15 years experience. I mean, that's good, but that's not necessary. The profile is very different. Yeah.
I'll just say, he's exactly right. Almost every researcher in our company had a very strong academic background, many of whom were faculty, and in fact, Catherine, who I mentioned is one of my colleagues, is one of the evangelists. She was a tenured professor, and a few months ago she joined us. And so many of the people in our company have very established academic careers. So we're very familiar with that whole world. So there's nothing you need to convince us about, especially.
Yeah, maybe one thing that I would add, and this is not just quantum, but across the board, I think people who have PhDs are, in many cases, unique. You have special talent in a very specific field, and figure out who needs that, and try and go in that direction. Don't necessarily compromise and say, oh, I've done a PhD, I've worked all these years, but now I want to do a job because a job that someone that I'm, one, not the most qualified to do, and two, doesn't use all these skills that I've got along the way, because I don't see enough people advertising for jobs with PhDs. And I've said this at a previous career panel for engineering PhD students. Very few companies, and maybe quantum is the one exception, are able to advertise jobs where the requirements, even in quantum it's true, where the requirement's a PhD, because I mean, who's going to look at that ad? How many people, how lucky do you have to be? And so the jobs that require PhDs, a lot of them are not advertised, or they're, people are advertising for something lower because, that's just, most of the people who are looking at it are going to be. Figure out where you want to work and what you can contribute, and just go out there and say, this is me, I can do this thing for you guys. But be specific. Don't, if you're applying to Entangle Networks, say something about what we're doing. Ideally you read a couple of papers and say something about that. But definitely don't undervalue what you've learned.
So I believe we have a couple questions from the Zoom chat.
We do actually, yes. There's one question that is asking for advice that you might give to someone who's doing a PhD in theoretical quantum optics and quantum information, considering that currently the industry seems to value more practical degrees. And I think the question was sort of answered at the undergraduate level, but since it was a PhD level, I thought it would be interesting to ask.
I think everyone needs people with a background in quantum optics and quantum information. I think you have 400 quantum companies, and you can apply to any of them, and you will be a top candidate.
Yeah, I think exactly.
I guess to rephrase slightly, I know as someone who had a PhD in quantum optics, it's easy to get into that mindset where you feel that what you're doing is so esoteric and so specific that there's no way I'm ever going to find application for this, and as Mark alluded to earlier, I'm stuck in this problem now, I can't do anything else. Each of you has in some way managed to break out of that. How do you kind of break out of that mindset?
So, I mean, in my case, I didn't break very much out of that mindset. I said, I've been doing quantum computing for, 15 years, and I'm really good at it. And there's this industry that really needs people who are doing quantum computers. And so I have two choices. One is, work for someone else, or do my own company. And I just have this this skill that is rare, right? And I agree. One of the problems you have in academia is, and this is especially true at some place like IQC. Everyone around you knows quantum computing, right? So at IQC, you're surrounded by like 100 other people who are doing PhDs in quantum computing. There's 20 faculty who are all experts on quantum computing, and you think this is the world, but that's not the world. This is it's one institution, and the rest of the world is people who have absolutely no idea.
So I guess, yeah, in my case, it was, again, it wasn't exactly breaking out, but it was sort of pivoting. And I think that's one thing you can do. You can, I mean, if you happen to be doing something where you are uniquely qualified to continue on in that kind of vein of expertise or whatever and do that for the company, great. But a lot of the time, particularly as, if you have a PhD, you're going to have a lot of marketable skills that maybe you didn't realize were marketable skills that you can then kind of turn into, or you can redirect sort of profitably into different roles. Yeah.
And so was there another one in the Zoom chat as well?
Yes. So there's another question that is asking, so how does a day-to-day for an intern at a company, whether at an undergrad level or at a grad level?
So day to day at the Bank of Canada I guess it was COVID, so a little bit different in terms of day to day, but it was very much that we would have a few projects ongoing, and within those projects the tasks would be devied so that to fit the skill level that I had at the time, and it was very much like a back and forth in. We would try and do something that would push the limits of what I was capable of doing at the time. I would inevitably not be able to do it, ask for help, not be able to do it some more, and then, eventually in that sort of loop, figure it out and be the better for it. Because a lot of the things that we are doing, or at least what anyone is doing, is still quite new. Like even for, I guess, you guys, you would be, anything new that you're doing is the first time that you're looking at it as well. So you can. Like even the people that you're working around are also looking. They might just have more of a basis to that in terms of how well they're able to understand it and be able to learn it sooner. But still, there's a lot of things, and whenever you're starting a new project, there's a lot of different avenues that you would take. So for us, it was just for me at least, it was identifying one of those avenues and then running it. Another aspect was I've been fortunate that they've let me do a little bit of the writing for the papers that we've written. So it was a lot of there was that sort of literature review and writing an introduction properly, and there are different aspects that anyone can kind of write, and it's not really domain specific. And then I guess there was also the aspect that running things on an actual quantum computer is not always a trivial task, and sometimes that's the work that Vladimir specifically likes to give to me. But yeah, still nonetheless important and needs to be done. Things like running simulations on GPUs. Those are things that the skills that I had that I could do and help out with. So. Really, it's person specific, I think, especially when you're in small teams, which is nice in our field, because we are in a group that is specific, right? If we had if there was a conference in something else, there'd be so many more people, right? So we have, because you're on a small team, it can be very specific to you, and what you have, what you know already, and what you're interested in learning.
I can add to that. So last year I was in part of this Xanadu residency program, which again, it was all remote because of COVID. But the day-to-day was basically, again, it was a small team. It was just my supervisor and I initially working on this thing, which now has 6 or 7 people working on it, the code book. So we just started, we sat down, it was new for her as well, and that was a very exciting experience because I was like, well, why don't we do this? And she was like, no, we can't do that. No, let's make it an RPG instead, or whatever, and stuff like this. It was literally, this is what we discussed. It was crazy. So we would just throw ideas around, some things stuck, some things didn't. But it was really, really fun. And then I got to go away and like, you know, for instance, one of the chapters in the codebook is about Hamiltonian simulation. And as far as I know, it's the only kind of like, let's say relatively self-contained treatment of Hamiltonian simulation that exists, right? Everything else is in papers. So that was really fun. I got to go away, read papers, summarize them, draw pictures, make simulations, and so on. And that was what I did. Like, it was awesome. But then, other aspects of the day-to-day, so, you know, there were meetings, and that's way more meetings than I was used to as a graduate student. And just hanging out with other residents virtually, which was really fun as well. So like, this is a really cool thing about doing an internship or a residency at a company which is large enough to have multiple residents, is that you have this cool little cohort of people who are also in part of this weird, tiny, specialized field that kind of nerdy in similar directions, or at least, you know, the dot product is like fairly close to one. And it's a really nice way to meet people.
I think we are running low, so we're running short of time, so we will answer these questions, but we're going to do them at rapid fire. So if you want to take the mic, we'll just keep the answers brief as we wrap up the last few minutes.
Yeah, so the big message that I'm getting is that PhDs are highly regarded for what you have to do. And currently I'm just starting my master's. And so if I were to do a PhD, that would be about like 7 years in the future. And in that time, a lot of things can change. And then it's like the PhD itself is at least a commitment of like 5 years or so, and possibly much more. How do I recalibrate myself like in that time and like, you know, keep up with that? And like particularly like, you know, I'm considering like doing like a PhD in like quantum information, if that helps. And like, but you know, of course, that's still 2 years in the future. A lot can change. But just with the question of recalibrating yourself and how to keep up with that, like how would you suggest that? And like, should I go down this road or not? And you know, right?
We have to give a quick answer to that.
I have a quick answer to that. If you're doing a PhD, do it because you want to do a PhD. Don't do a PhD because you want to go into industry. It's not a good life choice.
Anyone have anything to add to that? That about covers it? All right, and
I also heard like a comment like no, it's a word like you really don't want to hear, but just be resilient.
Can you repeat the question?
I heard like you said like nobody want to hear the word no, but I bet like this is every like professional may have like faced this though.
So you said no one wants to hear the word no. I said the worst thing you like. There's nothing bad about hearing no.
Yeah.
Right. That's the worst thing that can happen. Someone will say no to you, but if someone says yes, it's high gain, right? So go out there and try, because again, you know.
Just like brush it off.
Yeah.
And like just enjoy the climb, even though it's not like instant gratification.
all right, and I think I saw one more hand up in this, from Vivek there, and then I think that'll be our last question.
So my question is about, you're an intern in your companies and kind of laterally moving positions or responsibilities, because most U of T engineers at least are on their search for, or third-year engineers are on their search for like a 12 to 16-month co-op position. And that's kind of the Goldilocks spot between a 4-month summer internship and a full-time position. So it's like enough time for you to kind of get settled in this company, but you would also want to explore your degrees of freedom. Like if you get put into a software team, maybe you want to like, expand your horizon and try the hardware team or this and that. So at your respective companies, what kind of is the culture for interns spreading their field of view? Suppose they get into position X, can they kind of zoom out and look at other fields as well?
So I'm not familiar with the thing you just described. So at Quantinuum, we have internships and we have jobs. Those are kind of the two things that we have. So, so with interns, and I should mention, if I haven't already spoken to you downstairs, so we absolutely do have internships. The process is open now. We make decisions in December for next summer. So, so this is exactly the right time that you should be sending us applications for that. So, so we have summer internships. It's a very strong program. We have many applications in this process, and we obviously evaluate people, thinking, should we hire them for a job? It's a way for us to get to know you and you to get to know us. And so, so yes, if you're working for us as an intern and you see something else that you should be doing, by all means, change. That's the whole point of it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us as a small startup, there is no set process, but we would like the intern to tell us what they want to get out of the internship. And if we can't make that happen, it's fine. I mean, the point is for you as an intern, the main point is for you as an intern to get the right experience with what you want.
Yeah, so at the bank there isn't really like a hardware team, but within the types of algorithmic problems that we have, there's many different categories, and it was very much just like asking. Like for me, like I had never written a paper before, and I asked the lead on the project, can I help you with the introduction? And she said yes, because it's less for her, and it's training for me. So in that sense, like there's a lot of rooms in terms of like just finding what you're interested in. And I don't know, like I got the opportunity, or I'm having the opportunity right now of like leading my own project, and it was as easy as just asking, like and like asking, not just like laymanly asking, but like having backing behind it and having shown interest, like afterwards saying, look, this is what I'm interested in doing. This is the application to the company itself. Can I run with it? And let's make it a project. And some back and forth happens, and it worked out. It's worked out for me. So why can't it work out for you, right? So yeah.
And yeah, I'm going to say something fairly similar. As far as I know, we don't have co-op positions. There's internships, there's the residency program, which is scheduled to run at the same time, I think, as Continuum. But there's a lot of flexibility within that. And like, again, within jobs, so like I literally just last week I was like, oh, hey, can I do research as well? And they're like, why? And I'm like, well, and then I gave them some reasons, and they're like, okay, sure. And again, partly it's because it's in the company's interests to have people who can sort of put different pieces of the puzzle together. And I think the flexibility is, again, we're still in the process of defining what this thing is. And that means that people who can kind of see different parts of the puzzle and kind of know the big picture and blah, 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 all of that is actually really helpful. So, yeah.
With that, I think we have come to the end of the panel. Mark, Aaron, Narain, David, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and thank you to everyone for the questions.
And thank you once again, everyone on the panel. It's been a pleasure hosting the panel. Thank you so much again, Dr. John Donohue, also as our lead moderator. And with that, folks, that was the last program of the day. Now, before we begin, before we end, it's very too late to begin. Before we end today's conference, I want to just mention to you guys like how much hard work has been going into the conference to make this happen. And I want to start off actually with an example. The first commercialized transistorized device was a hearing aid. And it had 2 vacuum tubes and a transistor. And that was in the year 1952, so 70 years ago. And you look at the impact of the transistors today and how much it changed our entire lives. So I think where the stage is, where we are in the field, hopefully that's what's going to be in quantum. And that's very exciting. And we're living in an era where we can see the next revolutionary technology. And we're very proud to have hosted this conference. And we hope that that would be as a stepping stone to learn more about the field, to get inspired, and hopefully to get inspired enough to be part of the scientific progress in the field. We had over 350 registrations for the event. Thank you so much all again for being here today. Most conferences focus on graduate students, and that's like the best option. You barely see any conferences that focuses on, especially for high school and undergraduates. So we're very happy to have hosted this conference. It's been an immensely amount of fun planning this for the past 6 months. And I want to say a couple of special thanks, actually, starting with Dr. John Donahue, who've been helping us with the IQC Quantum exhibit, moderating the panel, and we've been in touch for the past 6 months nonstop. Thank you very much. Special thanks to Special thanks to Dr. Anna Dyring from the Center for Quantum Information and Quantum Control, Dr. Devira Sigal, Professor Daniel James for helping us put the initial program together and get this started. I want to thank our sponsors, the Center for Quantum Information and Quantum Control, the Institute for Quantum Computing, Quantinuum, Xanadu, Agnostic, the Department of Physics at the University of Toronto, and the Division of Engineering Science at the University of Toronto. Again, we could have not hosted the event without the support from our sponsors. And at the end, I want to send a special thanks to all the members behind the planning, everyone on the QSide organizing committee, starting from our logistics team, Vivek Dan, Shoshwata Chowdhury, Brianna Benoy, from our partnerships team, Maggie Lee, Parth Mohendru, Nicholas Garcia, Stephanie Chu, Noel J. Kubik, Kaylin Yoon. On our program development team, Arkra Prava Chowdhury, Amelie Zhang, Amber King, Lana Buzonik, and from our design team, Emily Sue and Mayank Shenoy. And folks, with that, this is the end of our conference. Thank you so much again for joining us.